here at TMSA.
Yes.
We've got Bourbon Street off in the background here. It's a little bit more quiet today versus the previous 2 days, but we're here for TMSA's Elevate Conference Transportation Marketing and Sales Associate for folks who don't know. Tell everybody about you, about your role, how you got into, you're the co-founder and partner over at Luminaries.
Yeah.
And you provide sales training to logistics companies. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's a perfect summary. Yes, yeah. So we've, Luminaries has been up and running for about 7 years, but my partner and I both come from logistics. So that's kind of why we weren't intending to like specialize in logistics, but we know logistics, we love logistics, and there aren't a lot of people who know what we know and also know this dynamic and challenging industry. So we do sales development and strategy development, process improvement, all like within the sales space for logistics companies.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I definitely want to touch on the process side of things because
Sure.
I'm such a process nerd. But you spent, I think I saw on your LinkedIn profile, 9 years or close to 10 years at C.H. Robinson.
Yeah, I think I was like a month or two shy of 10 years, but yeah, a strong decade there. Yeah.
So what did you have a sales role at C.H. Robinson? Is that, I mean, obviously that's where you got your feet wet as far as the industry is concerned, or did you start in logistics prior to that?
No, that was my first logistics experience. I never intended to work in logistics like many people in our industry, like by happenstance. But I had a bunch of different roles there. I was started in in learning and development for actually the global forwarding part of the organization. I worked at the sourcing produce side for a while. I went into more of like a general HR talent development kind of space. In my last couple of years, I was supporting the commercial strategy development and execution. So lots of different roles, but in all of them, I always had like a sales angle to it. I led the sales curriculum there for a couple of years, so everything that they did from a sales learning standpoint, I was a part of. So I love salespeople. Like I connect to salespeople. I identify as a salesperson. So that was why like we really kind of went down that angle, and it's just such an important part of organizational success that we really wanted to lean into like the commercial growth area.
So what was the light bulb moment for you to say that you wanted to start your own company?
You know, I don't know if I have one. I remember being like a young 20-something, like barely in my career, and I knew I wanted to be a consultant because I have like entrepreneurial parents, you know, and I wanted to like own my own business and have that kind of challenge in front of me. But I just, I'm the kind of person that likes lots of different challenges. I get bored painfully, quickly, you know, kind of a thing. So doing lots of different things and helping lots of different companies like meet lots of different challenges was very appealing to me. So I think I picked the name Luminaries Consulting like 15 years before we started the company.
That's awesome.
We owned the domain name, my partner and I, for 9 years before we opened our doors. So it was a long time coming, and we were really excited to get up and running. It's been really fun ever since.
And so when you start Luminaries, what was sort of the first education? Did you start off with training, or did you start off with creating educational materials? What was sort of that first thing that you did?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time doing like the groundwork of like getting your business up and running, probably more than we actually needed to, you know, like the website and the incorporation materials and like all of those kind of things. But we definitely started with like the talent development side. So let's build some sales curriculum, let's build some learning that we can then bring to customers so we're ready. We did most of our stuff custom for folks like right out of the gate because everybody's needs are pretty unique. And then we learned really quickly that like there's a lot of consistent needs out there, and people want to like get something deployed really quick. They want to come to somebody who has the answers rather than like coming up with them themselves. So we kind of flipped our model a couple of times in that process. But yeah, talent development is kind of where we start with people.
Where would you say that obviously sales has evolved just in general over the last decade, but especially since COVID, with these sort of hybrid models of work from home, work in the office. So what does sort of the modern sales team look like inside of a logistics company?
Oh, it looks like so many different things, and it kind of depends on the company, what their commercial strategy is, like how much new customer acquisition versus current customer growth, and what that balance looks like, which industries you're selling into or specializing in. It all looks different, but there are like some trends that have evolved for sure. I think there's over the last maybe decade plus people have kind of been more delineating between sales and account management, which is typically recommended, I think. But then, over the last 5 years, then the rise of the SDR kind of came, and then there's kind of different marketing engagement that's been happening over the last couple of years. So all of those things tend to evolve, but logistics is, I find, like in most things, and a lot of things in terms of adoption, usually not like the forefront of innovation for all of these things. So you'll see kind of sales practices evolve in like SaaS selling, for example, or something like that. And then a couple years later, it gets into logistics. But there's just been a lot of kind of changes like that over the last couple of years that I've noticed.
So when a company decides that they want to work with you, what is sort of the first things that you help them look at, help them achieve? Is it gathering data? Is it meeting with different, sort of team members? What does that look like?
Yeah, it depends on in which way we're working with them. Because we do sometimes little projects for people. Sometimes we have like really big partnerships. But usually if we're trying to tackle big stuff, we start with really kind of getting our arms around their current state. So figuring out kind of all of the different things that are a part of their commercial strategy that are working or maybe not working, and what that strategy looks like where they want to go long term that might be different than there is today, and then kind of building a plan to bridge the gap.
So I want to get into a little bit, because we just got done with the shippers panel, and they were really like nailing home some great ideas for sales and marketing teams. And one of the things that really stood out to me was the statement of hunters versus gatherers. And that is the second time, or actually what you just mentioned is the third time that I've heard this role of you want to have the head hunters and then you want to have the account management side of things.
Yeah.
Do you find that most logistics companies, or a lot of logistics companies that you work with, do they have that sort of framework, or is it still very much like pound the phones, here's a bunch of cold leads, and good luck?
Yeah, it's all over the board, right? I think that I think it's a healthy practice to have some delineation between your true salespeople, like your hunters, and your farmers, the ones that are cultivating and growing the existing customers. Depending on what your commercial strategy is, what kind of customers you're going after, that might look different. If you're trying to sell transactional business, if that's where you're winning, you might have more of a hybrid role that's selling small deals and keeping those because they're small and you need to grow them. If you're selling bigger kind of contractual business, if you're looking for partnerships, it is, I haven't seen it done successfully yet, I don't think, where someone can truly go and like hunt and build those big relationships and still have time to cultivate and grow. It's just like a little bit of an unfair expectation to put on one person. So it depends. There's not one answer to it, but I would say in general, where you run into problems is where your commercial strategy does not match the structure that you have. Those things just need to be synced up.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like two totally different skill sets, where someone is actively going out there trying to get new business versus, keeping the customers happy or expanding the business. And that's more of, I guess, where the account manager, the gatherers, the farmers, as you say, would really fit in.
Yeah, it's a lot of different skill sets, but it's also even different kind of expectations that those roles have. I mean, think about doing something like this. We're at Elevate for a couple of days. If you're a salesperson, if you're a big outside salesperson, you're probably going to some industry conferences for your customer. You're gone for 3 days, schmoozing, wining and dining your prospects. If you are managing accounts at that same time, stuff's falling apart during those 3 days. One of those balls is going to get dropped, and you don't want either of them to. So it's just kind of healthier for everyone if you can get a little bit of a different delineation there.
Yeah, especially with delegation. I think that's what I struggle with the most when it comes to my own sales, is that it's very much inbound, but then if you're not ready to sign on sort of this is probably a really good segue into the follow-up, because the follow-up for me is probably the most challenging, just from a time perspective. So I'm curious as to how you're helping some of these companies handle the follow-up process, because that is probably my biggest struggle. It's like either you're ready to sign or I'm moving on without you.
Right.
And I know that's not the right mindset to have. They need a little bit of coaxing. They need a little bit of reassurance that they're making the right decision. So how do you I guess develop a strong follow-up process in your sales?
Yeah. Well, we're entrepreneurs, so it's different because we're wearing like 100 hats. Like you're a business owner, you're selling deals, you're managing those customers, right? So it's a different kind of deal. Usually, if you have a little bit more role clarity, like inside of an organization, then you're just the salesperson or something like that. Then that's like a lot of the process work that will work with people. So if you have a really clear sales process, that's first step, right? If you have your CRM integrated to your sales process, that's another good step. If you're using that CRM, like actually leveraging it to remind you to follow up with prospects, maybe even to automate some of those things, that's another great step. So it just kind of depends on where people are, but if all the sales processes I think need to be accustomed to the organization, fit to your strategy, and then you have some of those disciplines or those rigors created in general. But then I also think you need to think about what does that customer need in terms of follow-up. If you're having a conversation and they're like, no, we're not ready right now, but maybe at the end of next quarter, let's have another conversation. So that's just not going to be the same follow-up process that you have with somebody else that's like, call me next week. So you just have to kind of customize those and then have the internal discipline to remember to follow up on that. Even things like Google Tasks, super helpful for reminders there.
I think that was when I worked in-house in marketing for an asset-based brokerage. It was the biggest hurdle to try to get the sales guys to use a damn CRM. They just are used to just flying by the seat of their pants. I mean, I will say, and maybe to straw man it a little bit on their side of things. This was kind of like newer technology. This was like 15 years ago, so it was newer technology. They didn't care. They didn't want to work inside any of this kind of stuff. And so, from I guess from that lens, from the people who have been in the game for a long time versus the people who are just entering the game, what are some of those, I guess, dynamics of how maybe you help the older generation who doesn't want to adopt tech versus the newer generation who's maybe a little bit more gung-ho about adopting that tech?
Right. I mean, there are drawbacks to both of those ends of that spectrum, right? A lot of times we'll work with newer salespeople who will be so tech forward, they will do all the follow-ups and all the automation and reminders, but they're so scared to pick up the phone, so some of those basic things. Or then you have the people that are kind of more traditional. They want to talk to people on the phone, but then they're not taking advantage of some of those tech and kind of advanced things. That's why we really believe in kind of lifelong learning and constant evolution. David Hoppins was just talking about this inside of Elevate there. But you really just have to always be a consummate learner because these things are evolving. Think of how AI has evolved just within the last year. I mean, I can't even speak to this. I know you're much more versed there, but you have to stay on top of these things and figure out which different pieces you can kind of incorporate into your own strategy to make you the best person wherever you are in that spectrum.
Are you in freight sales with a book of business looking for a new home? Or perhaps you're a freight agent in need of a better partnership? These are the kinds of conversations we're exploring in our podcast interview series called The Freight Agent Trenches, sponsored by SPI Logistics. Now, I can tell you all day that SPI is one of the most successful logistics firms in North America who helps their agents with back office operations such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, but I would much rather you hear it directly from SPI's freight agents themselves. And what better way to do that than by listening to the experienced freight agents tell their stories behind the how and the why they joined SPI. Hit the freight agent link in our show notes to listen to these conversations, or if you're ready to make the jump, visit spi3pl.com.
So what are maybe some successes that you're seeing with all the evolution that's been going on? What are some, I guess, sort of modern suggestions or playbooks that you could recommend for companies to take if they know that they have a problem with their sales and that this time of the year, this time in the market, I should say, when we're kind of in a down market, people are starting really wanting to ramp their sales up again. So what would that, I guess, sort of approach look like and I would imagine it depends on the scale of the business as well.
Yeah, it depends on the scale of the business and also kind of, again, their commercial strategy or who they're selling to or what those people are looking for from them. But I think a lot of times where we see initial like opportunities to make some quick wins is like getting really clear on what your sales strategy is. I mean, that sounds so painfully obvious, right? But if you go ask a random salesperson for them to tell you, like Joe Schmo salesperson on the desk, what's your organization's sales strategy? Who are you trying to sell to? What are you trying to achieve? It's unlikely that you're probably going to get the same answer that sales leader will give you. So that like clarity and alignment in the sales strategy, I think, is really important. And then the process and all of the execution to kind of follow up with that. You have to make it as easy as possible for your salespeople to do their job. So clarity in strategy and clarity in process execution, what that looks like, what those expectations are, I think are really easy, quick wins for folks.
What is sort of a sample process that sales teams should be implementing? Is it like a hard, what the definition of, an MQL versus an SQL? Is that part of the process, or is it, everybody is, just sort of unknown until they fill out a form on the website?
Yeah.
What does, sort of a good sales process look like?
I think it can be all different levels of like granularity. Like if you're getting to MQLs and SQLs, that's a pretty granular sales process. I mean, I think at a high level, you need to figure out at minimum, again, this is going to sound like super obvious, but like, what is a prospect to us? At what point do they become a customer? When we're prospecting with somebody, like what's the next step? What does our discovery look like? What are we trying to get a face-to-face meeting? Are we trying to get a quote? Are we trying to get in their RFP cycle? All of that's going to depend on what your commercial strategy looks like. But just kind of those big buckets like that is a great first start. Make sure that's connected to your CRM, and make sure people know how to move prospects through each gate of that. Because what that gives you is like a shared language, and as you talk to people, and this is where this person is in the cycle. I can't get this prospect to move into the discovery phase. They won't open up to me. How can I do that? So you can talk about it to each other, but it also will give you you can create playbooks from that. You can give them the skills and the tools based on those things. It's just a really important first step for folks.
With COVID, there was a sort of a big adoption of e-learning and diving into membership and courses and things like that. Since then, it's kind of fallen off just a tad. So I'm wondering, what is sort of from a training perspective, where are you seeing some of the biggest, sort of light bulb moments for sales team? Is it in-person training? Is it e-learning? Is it, maybe a combination of the two? How are the salespeople upping their game in logistics?
Yeah. Well, first I'll say, whatever you're doing, do something, do some development, and you're moving in the right direction. But definitely, when COVID hit, everything went virtual, and some people really adopted that, and that was new for folks. People learned how to do it really quickly. We went from doing almost exclusively in person to everything virtual. We had to learn how to do it really well, and it absolutely can be just as effective to do it virtually. Some parts are more enjoyable to do in person, but so there's virtual versus in person, and there's also live versus not live, right? And what we tend to do is a blend of those things. I think after COVID, when it started to wrap up, right? Then people are kind of, how people revenge traveled after it. People revenge planned in-person development sessions after that too. So then all of a sudden in-person was back, but really virtual hasn't gone away. We do a lot of the blended learning is what we call it, where maybe there'll be kind of an e-learning course that people can take on their own time. That's a beautiful thing because it lets you learn at your own pace. It doesn't pull your entire sales team off the floor at the same time, that kind of a thing. But then we'll get together live, either virtually or in person, to do the practice, the application, the coaching. It's really hard to do those things not live. So you can do them really well in a Zoom environment or something like that, but the real-time practice, the feedback from a manager or from a facilitator, a coach like myself, is so critical. So whether that's kind of blended and then live virtual, or e-learning and then live in person, whatever that looks like for your team, I think can be really effective. a lot of times teams that are co-located, they want to do everything live in person because that makes sense. Or if you have your team all around many states or the country or the world, you're going to do more stuff virtually because then you don't have all of the travel and entertainment expenses. So it all can work as long as you're working with somebody who knows how to do it well.
Are you training people on site, like in person too?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, wow.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, actually a lot of our work, we do that. We don't have our own offices and facilities, but we're going to our clients all of the time. So sometimes that's kind of like custom work we'll do with them. Sometimes it's a part of their sales kickoff that they're having. We'll do something. But yeah, a lot of stuff that we do on site at customers.
Oh, that's super interesting because I imagine that it opens the door to do more like live training and instant feedback, and it's so much more, that kind of training maybe is a little bit better suited for live versus than, virtual.
Right. It's definitely, there's a different energy level that comes with getting together and doing some things. There's, the visibility of others' approaches, the ability to practice, the ability to get feedback. That can happen virtual or in person. But the energy in the room is kind of hard to replicate in a virtual environment. And then you have all of like the downtime interactions, right? Like even downtime at these conferences. When your team is together, they're having dinner together, they're talking in the hallways, they're like learning and building their network and kind of experiencing different examples of what people are doing. And that's also hard to replicate.
Yeah, because I would think that environment creates much more. So if you have sort of the e-learning, it sets the table stakes for the conversation or for the training, and then you have the in-person training where you can start making those more, connections and more, light bulb moments and getting that instant feedback instead of trying it out on the phone and failing miserably. At least you could get some of that instant feedback and be able to apply it immediately.
Right. That's what we always say to people. Like sometimes these things are really uncomfortable. Doing like a role play in front of your teammates is sometimes a lot scarier than actually doing it in front of a customer. Right? Like we get it. That's always the pressure that people say. But let's try something new in this environment rather than burning a bridge in front of a customer. Like let's try it here in what is, although it might not always feel like it is a safe environment, and then we'll figure out how to apply that to your customer when you get out in the real world.
One of the other phrases that I've heard a lot is, you just hear a lot in general with marketing and sales, but today specifically with the kickoff of the concert or conference, concert too. Yeah, we have a little bit of music going on here in New Orleans.
We are in New Orleans, yeah.
So what about KPIs? Like, what does, I guess, sort of a baseline level of KPIs look like for a modern logistics sales team?
That is so all over the board. We work with we're working with a client right now on their kind of customer-facing KPIs, for example. We would bring those into business review conversations or something like that. So what are you measuring? What does your customer want you to measure about their business to show that you're doing a good job? But if you're talking about like internal sales KPIs, like how do we know if our sales team is being successful? Is that where you're kind of going? Yeah. That can be all over the board too. I was just talking with somebody this morning that's kind of figuring out some of that stuff. And my coaching in that moment was like, if you're thinking about kind of what to measure or like what to tie goals and compensation to, start with the outcomes. What kind of outcomes are you looking for? What kind of results do you want from your sales team? That's what you should ultimately measure. That's the things that you're managing at the end of the day, managing to. And then if you're having a problem in one of those outcomes, then you start stepping back to what are the opportunities that are in their pipeline? Are you set up to get the results that you want, or do we need to start fixing your pipeline? And then what are the activities that are leading to those opportunities? Are you not doing enough outbound calling? Are you not having enough of XYZ kind of conversation? Are your emails awful? Like, what are those activities look like that are leading to the opportunities? You can kind of step back down that train. But what I often see with sales managers who are trying to get more like, I need to start managing our sales team more, I need to start coaching them more, as they start to get really gung-ho on managing the activities, which, if I'm coaching you and your goal is selling $1 million a month and you're selling $1 million a month, do I really care how many calls it takes you to get to that $1 million? Like, I should be saying, Blythe, have better calls. Like, I don't care how many you do as long as you get to this result. So I think people tend to get burned out, especially when you think about coaching or like CRMs. If you harp too much on the activities, focus on the results, and then if you have a problem there, then start stepping back.
Brokering success demands a battle-ready strategy. Tide TMS equips freight brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page, it's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. TIE equips your team with all of the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with TIE TMS. For more info, go to tai-software.com/battle stations, and we also have a link for you in the show notes to sign up for a demo.
So obviously executives care about, closed business and customers and expanding that business with them. Are there any other sort of sales activities that are important to them that they see their team making an effort on?
It probably depends. I think it also depends on the level of the executive and kind of what they're focused on. But at the end of the day, everybody wants the result. So if it's the revenue or the margin or the current customer growth or whatever kind of result you're looking for within that sales or account management team. But sometimes it's going to be different ones, kind of depending on what matters to them. I don't have a really great answer for this one is the number one. Yeah.
What about from the lens of, business? Because we, from that shipper panel too, they also mentioned that visiting in person goes so much further than blasting out emails and, trying to get somebody on the phone via cold calling. Is there room for, Zoom info and visiting people in person unexpected?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the visiting in person, I think, can be really helpful with prospects and current customers. Definitely with current customers. Try to figure out how to get face-to-face. It's night and day, the type of interaction and relationship building that you'll have. With prospects, it's trickier. I know that a lot of people will say, just stop by and drop off some donuts or whatever you're doing, knock on the door. It's not always super welcome these days. It's not always even allowed in the facility, depending on what it is. You can't just walk up to the dock door if you're a stranger, right? So I would proceed with caution when you do that. I know there are people that do it and swear by it, and honestly, what I say with anything that's sales and account management, if it's working for you, don't stop.
Yeah.
But think about how your customer would react to that situation, how you want to be perceived by that customer. Do you want to be this annoying person who's dropping off donuts, whether or not they like donuts? Or do you want to be this person who has, value to add in a conversation? You're opening the door in a right way to get in and then be invited to come into that. But I think there's room for a lot of variety in an entrance strategy. It can include in-person things. It's great if it does. I just wouldn't hang your hat on the random drive-by.
Yeah, that's I was thinking of when we're kids that they always tell you don't take candy from strangers. And then here we are as adults, stopping by as strangers with a bunch of donuts.
It's fine, right?
Especially if they're the new Dolly Donuts that Krispy Kreme just announced. So the Dolly Parton, Dolly Parton, I guess, has a line of donuts with Krispy Kreme now. So so that would be an instant win for me. I would get into the van if you had some Dolly Donuts.
Well, if
in
you're
the van.
trying to sell the Blythe, get some Dolly Donuts and it will work.
Yes, you can have your creeper van outside, and I will say yes. Where are we going?
Oh, funny.
All right, so last few questions here. What are some underutilized sales tactics or strategies that you're shocked that more logistics companies are not adopting?
Underutilized, I would still say phone calls, or people are not doing them enough, even though it's not new, it's not revolutionary or whatever. It's not revolutionary. There you go. Thank you. It's not revolutionary, but it is underutilized, and it's underutilized doing it well. So a really good phone outreach methodology built into your entrance strategy is it's so important. I think that leveraging social as a part of your entrance strategy is really important. You're talking about kind of that spectrum, and you don't want to hang your hat there either. You can't be your only entrance strategy, but a smart strategy that has, a phone call and a voicemail and an email that's followed up with, and then a LinkedIn connection, or researching something on LinkedIn and using it to craft a great phone call or email message. Those are definitely underutilized. And I think the last one is this its in-person component, right? Where it's conference connections or something like that. You're doing some research beforehand, you're setting up meetings, you're making these connections, you have great follow-up rigor afterwards. There's a lot of opportunity for doing that more effectively too. And then this is more on the marketing side, but I have been hearing lately from my marketing friends that like real direct like snail mail is like,
Yes.
like that's where it's at these days.
I have heard the same exact thing, especially I follow a lot of like subreddits around marketing and sales, and
Yeah.
snail mail has made a huge comeback. Handwritten letters, sending a box of cookies to, instead of showing up at the office with a box of donuts, you're sending a box of cookies to their home address, and those little things, like, you don't really get direct mail anymore unless it's like coupons or something. Like, when others are zigging, why don't you zag and make that connection with your customer?
Yeah, it's all about getting noticed and getting a conversation started. Like we were talking about earlier, I'm an entrepreneur and a salesperson too. Whenever I send like a handwritten thank you note to my clients or to other people that I work with, or if, like at Christmas time or something special, I send like something to their home that they can share with their families, I always get phone calls about those things. And that's the intent, like to start a conversation and make your customers feel appreciated, and then, keep you in mind, like in the back of their mind when something comes up and they need something.
I am curious, as you were talking earlier about the, making the phone calls, doing a little bit of research before you make the phone call. What does a sample phone call look like? How do you, I guess, sort of break that barrier with that person who's not expecting a phone call from you? They're probably in the middle of something, but they pick up the phone. Like, what are the first few sentences that you're saying as a sales rep?
Yeah. So we don't use like scripts for those kind of things, but it's really important to be very planned in those first couple of seconds because it is a disruption, and you are like, you're disrupting somebody's day. You need to get their attention. You need to like hook their curiosity in that quick conversation. So we recommend a couple of things like as a part of that first conversation. We would always recommend like doing your research in advance so you can have something that's showing your relevance. So I just noticed that this happened, or you might be experiencing something like this. You also have to have a really strong value proposition. And then you have to know kind of what your intent is with those things. What are you trying to get? Are you trying to get a conversation? Are you trying to get a quote? Like, what is your goal with this? And you put all those things together and say, hey, this is Blythe calling from Everything is Logistics. Hey, I noticed that this is happening. We happen to be able to help people with this kind of a thing. I'd love to grab some time with you to talk about that if it's of interest. Is it worth some time? So it can really come together in something that's really concise if you have those couple of building blocks laid out.
So if I am a business and I recognize I have a sales problem, what do I need to do to get my company ready to do work with somebody like you?
Well, it depends on how much clarity you have on what that problem might be. Like some of that might just be, hey, I'm not getting the results that I want. I know it's a problem. You might not know what is all leading to that lack of result, and we can help you figure that out. But kind of figuring out what that problem is, and then kind of figuring out whose buy-in you might need to kind of create, like, make that problem big enough for someone to care about, or like get the clarity to kind of solve it. But you don't necessarily have to have all those things solved before we start talking. Sometimes we can help you get there too.
All right, lastly, as far as like any takeaway tips that you want the audience to have, maybe they're struggling with their sales processes. Everybody wants more business, but what advice would you give to companies out there in order to, that tomorrow they could implement and it would help, increase the potential of getting new business?
Yeah. I would say some really foundational things are really important, like we've been talking about with like strategy and process, but even more like granular and foundational than that. Get super, super clear on who your ideal customer is. And if you don't know, for sure your sales team doesn't know. And make sure that it is so painfully clear, like you can picture them and what matters to them. And then once you have that, get really clear on your value prop. And your value prop can't be crap about your company. Like it has to be something that matters to that ideal customer, and it matters enough to get them to move away from the status quo. Like it has to be a big enough deal. It has to be, one of the mentors that I had at one point called it like, you have to be, don't be a vitamin, be a painkiller. Like make sure that it's something that's not just, oh yeah, I probably should take that vitamin today, but if I don't, like I'm not going to really be bothered tomorrow. A painkiller, like you found something that hurts so much, like I can't ignore it. Like I can't do anything until I've taken this pill. So figure out how to make yourself a painkiller with that value prop.
Oh, that's a great quote. Great quote. All right, for real, last question this time. Where can folks, follow you, follow more of your work? I know you're giving a talk here at TMSA.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a roundabout, takeaway from your talk, and then also, where can folks follow you and follow more of your work?
Yeah, well, we have a website, we have all that stuff, but we're pretty active on LinkedIn. We like to share a lot of things out there, so you can always find me there. And then when we're at Elevate, we're coming to conferences like this. We're at Elevate, we're at TA, we're at Food Shippers, we're at all of these kind of things. And we like to give people kind of practical advice for things they can implement today to be better leaders, better account managers, better salespeople. So actually my business partner, Sarah Black, is talking tomorrow about the power of influence and how building that key skill really helps you be a better salesperson, helps you be a better leader. So join for that. And then I'm leading a panel tomorrow on people, profit, and purpose. You don't have to choose. You can pull this all together and align your whole team in a direction to get all of those things done.
Well, perfect. Hopefully a lot of these talks, I should probably clarify this before I speak on it, but hopefully a lot of these talks or takeaways are going to be loaded up into the member portal over on TMSA, at least some of the takeaways, and if not, then there's future webinars, which you're obviously a part of, and live events that the TMSA offers. So I would encourage folks to check out. I'm going to be putting all the links in the bio, or at least in the show notes, anywhere they can get in contact with you, and then also for TMSA for that additional training. So Holly, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you and right on Urban Street.
Yes, I know we had some music, so hopefully y'all all enjoyed the music, but that's the kind of entertainment I think you get from a place like New Orleans.
Right, you can't control it.
Right. Well, Holly, thank you again.
Thanks.